And then somebody says, well, the Hulk can't perform CPR. And the reason I liked that as the title is I think it's silly, but at the same time, if you think about it, the Hulk is a superhero, but his strength, his overwhelming strength, can also be a downside because he wouldn't be able to do something life-saving and delicate as CPR. He would, put his whole fist right through your sternum,
right?
If he tried to,
right.
I always thought that was funny for other superheroes as well. Yeah, I always thought that was funny for other superheroes as well. Like Hank McCoy, the Beast, he's covered in hair. How is he performing surgery? How does he scrub it?
Right, yeah. Welcome back to our favorite part of the week. It's time to listen to Sounds of Health, where we share the stories, people, and resources that help others to improve their physical, emotional, and financial well-being. Whether you consider yourself a health enthusiast, a wellness warrior, or you're simply looking for information, guidance, and inspiration, you're in exactly the right place. I'm your host, Dave McNiven, and today I'm so excited to welcome Lou Gaudio to the show. Lou is an actor, writer, voiceover artist, and host of the podcast Robots Vs Dinosaurs. He's a U.S. Navy veteran and was the recipient of the 2015 Archer Craig Mathias Screenwriting Award. His play, The Hulk Can't Perform CPR, love the title by the way, premiered at New York City's Crane Theater in 2016. Lou is a writer and performer in the live monthly sketch show Our Bar. You can see him in the Pure Magic Pictures film Skye Hoshi, as well as its upcoming sequel. He has a background as a personal trainer and ran the New York City Marathon, and he's also a technology expert and works for a major technology company. This morning, we wish he was here in the office with us because this is actually the first podcast we're doing over Zoom, and Jason and I had some technology challenges. But Lou, we're so excited to have you here. Any way you can be here, thanks for joining us.
I'm excited to be here. Thank you for having me.
Now, tell me really quick, how long have you been doing your podcast?
Oh, that's a good question. At least since 2020.
Oh, wow.
I think that's when it started. Because I had a lot of free time, like a lot of people did during the pandemic.
Sure, yeah.
And I'm fairly certain that's when I started. I had the idea for it before then, but I think that's what gave me the opportunity to start it. So,
that's awesome. Yeah, I probably had the idea for doing a podcast during that time too, but just not the means. It was when Jason and I reconnected that we started to get into this world. But that's great. I really want to talk to you about that podcast. It seems very near and dear to what I'm interested in. But I do want to give you a chance to give us more on your background, because I think you have such an eclectic mix of things that you're doing. I think it might not be apparent to people yet exactly why we're having you on this podcast, a health and wellness podcast. So why don't you tell us about how you got to where you are, what your background is, and what you're doing now?
Sure thing. I was going to say you listed a lot of things that I do, but it didn't sound like sleep was on that list, unfortunately. But I do fit that in my schedule where I can. I guess my background, the way I got started being interested in health is when I joined the Navy. That was a life-changing experience for me for a lot of reasons. I traveled more than I was ever able to before. It got me in better shape than I had ever been in. And so when I finished my time in the Navy, the first job that I looked for was to work in a gym, mainly because at the time I just wanted a free gym membership because I knew I was going to be spending a lot of time in a gym. And so I just kind of took a job at the front desk. That one of the perks was being able to work out for free. And one of the even better perks that I discovered from that was being able to work out with the personal trainers that basically lived in the gym. Sometimes after my shift, they'd be in there because they live there day and night. Right. And they'd be like, Lou, come on, I'm going to teach you how to do kettlebells, or I'm going to teach you how to do this or that. And so I started getting in getting in with them and having a lot of fun learning from them. And one day, one of them just said to me, this is something I think you'd be good at. You can get certified, go through NASM. And he gave me like a book to look at, and I signed up for a course. And within, I think, 2 or 3 months, I ended up becoming a personal trainer. Really, really enjoyed it. I got a lot out of it. I really liked working with people doing that. And eventually a position opened up as a personal training assistant manager. I did that, and then I became the personal training manager. And yeah, that's part of my, I guess, like health and fitness background.
Gotcha. Now, were you doing that alongside of the arts and acting and writing and all of those things as well?
So yes, the main reason I've always wanted to live in New York City was the opportunities for film, theater, acting, just the entertainment industry,
right, of course,
in general. And one of the very first things I got involved with was a show that Jason was also involved with called Minions of Gozer. And if you're familiar with Rocky Horror Picture Show,
yes,
it's a shadow cast. The movie is screened while performers dress up in costumes, use props to act out the scenes that you're watching on screen simultaneously and interact with the audience. There's audience participation. So imagine that, but with Ghostbusters.
Awesome.
Yeah. So Jason got me involved in that. He and I were friends, very good friends in high school. And he got me on audition to do that show. And we did that for a while. Through that, I met a friend, Mike, that was involved in this other live theater show that has kind of become my main theater outlet since living in New York, Our Bar. So that's a show that started around the same time, like 2009. And that's when I moved to the city, and I got involved with it about a year later. And it's still going. So that's
great.
I've been doing that show for about 15 years. I always tell people it's one of the longest relationships that I've maintained in my life.
That's great. And that's a monthly show? That's a sketch show?
Yes, it's called Our Bar. It's a live sketch show that takes place in a bar. We like to describe ourselves as SNL meets dive theater. Yeah. It's the name is a riff off of Our Town. And the way that show got started before I was involved in it is one of the actors and now main producers of the show, Jen, was working in a bar, an Irish whiskey bar called Falcha on the Midtown East. I almost said Upper East Side. Neighborhoods in New York City are a lot of contentious. If you call the wrong
right
cross streets,
you have to be careful.
So I had to think about that
sure.
one. But yeah, it's Murray Hill, technically, Midtown East. And anyway, Jen was working as a bartender there, and her and some of her friends had this idea to do this show that was like slice of life in a bar. And it kind of still has a similar format where Jen is the active bartender during the show. So she's serving drinks to the but also to the actors in scenes who are ostensibly bar patrons. And so it's all just kind of going on all at the same time, but it's basically an hour-long show in sketch format. So each scene is like 3, maybe 4 minutes, usually comedy, but the only stipulation is it's just something that could plausibly happen in this bar on this night.
Gotcha. That's awesome. I love that idea.
Yeah.
I think the most impressive thing with Our Bar is how the group pivoted during COVID, and they leaned in really, really hard to doing a virtual sketch comedy over Zoom.
Oh, wow.
And it worked so well. This is prior to Saturday Night Live doing it as well. Our Bar did a great job. And Lou, you were able to write a few sketches, I remember, and direct a few as well. It was phenomenal. and everyone was logging in, for your nightly entertainment, of course, socially distanced.
Right.
But they made it still feel like you were together with someone experiencing sketch comedy. It was phenomenal.
That's amazing. That's really great. Now, do those episodes exist somewhere?
Yes, we actually still have those on Facebook. So if you follow our Facebook page, Our Bar, you may have to type in ourbarnyc to distinguish it from some other similar named pages.
Sure.
But yeah, some of those Zoom shows were I thought pretty incredible, like what we pulled off. Every year, we've been doing the show for 15 years, and once a year we do what we call an event show. And so a typical month of Our Bar will just be an hour-long series of 3-4 minute scenes that are each usually written by a different writer. Each scene is just its own self-contained world, its own self-contained characters and story. But once a year we do this event show, for example, a wake or a wedding reception or a 10-year high school reunion. And so the whole show will be centered around that theme. So when we had to switch and pivot to Zoom, we put our creative minds together and we came up with doing like a telethon version. And we called it Beerathon. And because of the video format, we took advantage of that and we were able to sort of make fake commercials for fake products that would air in between some of the sketches where we're trying to like raise money to save the bar. And before it gets bought out by Tessa von Appleby, the evil CEO of Applebee's, who's going to just turn the bar into a franchise. So it was really fun.
Very cool.
And we got to just kind of, instead of being like, oh, we're stuck in this Zoom format, we're like, well, let's embrace it and use video to our advantage.
Yeah, those challenges always develop more creativity, right? You find ways around them. So that's
well
good.
Said.
So just to get back to kind of how you started. So are you from Connecticut originally?
Yes, from a small town called Guilford, Connecticut.
Okay, yep. We've had a few guests from Guilford, Connecticut already. And so then you went to college in Connecticut, or?
No, I went to Long Island University for a few years, and then I went into the Navy. And when I got out of the Navy, I was living in New York and in the city, not Long Island. And
Gotcha.
So I finished my degree and also my degree in film. And I also got a second degree in English and creative writing from Hunter College.
Oh, fantastic. Now, when did you officially move into the city?
2009. End of 2009.
Okay, gotcha. Okay. And so while you've been there, you've had this personal training journey with the gym, right? And then also doing this writing and acting and performing. So how do you balance all of that? I mean, and now it sounds like too that you have a full-time job with a technology company. Where do you find the balance between all those things?
Well, that's kind of how I balance it. It's a part-time job.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah, that gig economy. So
yeah, right.
Yeah, I actually to be honest with you, the last full-time job that I've had since living in the city was when I was a personal training manager. Because that was, usually 7 a.m. till 8 p.m. Being one of the first people in the gym, one of the last to leave.
Yeah.
And that was great for a while. But when I wanted to start doing more creative things and getting more into acting and writing, I started pivoting to working part-time and picking up gigs here and there.
Gotcha. In order to support the creative pursuits that you have.
Exactly. And also to be able to do all of them and balance things out. And
right. Not an easy thing to do.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you're not doing the personal training anymore, right?
No, I've actually a few times in the recent past, hired a personal trainer.
Okay.
Just to see what it's like on the other side of the fence.
Yeah, sure.
And that's always been a really interesting experience. Because it's one of those things where when you consider yourself, a knowledge expert on a subject, and then you're able to humble yourself and ask somebody for help who's working in that field professionally at the moment, it's interesting, like how much you can find out. I thought I knew all this stuff, but the science is updated.
Yeah, changing every day.
Changing every day, as it should, with any field of science.
Right.
And B, sometimes the biggest component is not the know-how, but the motivation and having somebody hold you accountable. So that's something that's helped me a lot.
Yeah, that's always a big challenge is, having that motivation and that accountability so that you're consistent. Because with any way of trying to get healthy, eating well, exercising, consistency is such a big part of that.
Mm-hmm.
Now, have you maintained that healthy lifestyle for yourself while you're pursuing all of these other things?
So I have and I haven't, to be perfectly honest with you. The pandemic was a big challenge for a lot of people, and I include myself in that group.
Yeah.
Going from commuting to work every day, and I got into a good habit of riding a bike to and from work every day, even in the winter. And I kind of made myself do that to keep up my cardio. And so as soon as that option was taken away from me, it was just naturally harder to fit in my cardio aspect of working out every day.
Right.
And it very, very quickly fell to the wayside. And I ended up getting a lot, let's say gaining a bit of weight, losing some of my better eating habits. And I've been on the upswing since then. I think like anybody else, I go through fits and starts. I go through phases where I'm really, really good about being consistent. And sometimes where I falter because I'm human.
Yeah.
Last year, I had some life events that kind of affected my mental health, and as a catalyst, that affected my physical health. And I gained a lot more weight than I was intending to. But the positive end to that story, or not end to that story, it's an ongoing journey.
Of course.
Is this year, one of my resolutions was to, whether or not I work out or do anything intense, was just simply spend 1 hour a day in the gym. And I've maintained that by literally setting a timer. On my way to the gym, I set a 1 hour timer. And even if I'm low energy that day, just being in that environment, I'll at least do something. I'll do a walk or a jog on the treadmill. I'll do, a few pull-ups or some kind of resistance exercise. And it's definitely working because this year, since January, I've lost 30 pounds.
That's great.
So
I mean, just
April
committing to being in the space, right? That's part of the battle, right?
Yeah, and it's always been a cycle too. I'm sure a lot of people experience this, where the more I'm working out, the more I crave healthier foods and vegetables.
Of course, yeah.
The more I eat those, the more I feel like working out, and it's one of those good cycles that feeds itself.
Yeah, for sure. Now, how about with the acting and the writing side of things? How long have you been doing that? Have you done that your entire life, or when did you get into that?
Acting, I've done a lot since high school. I was very involved. Jason and I were both very involved in our school's theater program. Guilford High School has a really good theater program.
Fantastic, yeah.
Every year puts on a staged play, a musical, and a one-act festival, which is all student written. And in addition to some other, variety shows and things like that. And Jason and I were both very, very involved in almost every show each year that we were attending high school. And And so that's the acting side of it is something I got really involved with early on. It wasn't until I moved to the city, and actually our bar, I would say, is the thing that got me more interested in writing. And I always considered myself an actor, but our bar is one thing that's really cool about it is like SNL, like a lot of sketch shows, a lot of the actors do both. They write their own scenes and act in them. And it was just an environment where I was invited to come to one of the writers' meetings and collaborate and pitch ideas. And I just kind of sat down with a scene template one day and tried writing my own scene and fell in love with it.
That's great. That's really amazing. I do want to say I was just at one of the Guilford High School productions, and their theater department still is just absolutely incredible. The production value was very high. I had a niece who was in the show, Legally Blonde, and it was amazing. It was such a great show. They put on such a great performance.
Oh, that's great to hear. And I've never seen the show, but I love that movie.
Yeah, the movie's great. Yeah. Yeah, and the show it's a musical, obviously, and it was really well done. I really enjoyed it. I went to high school too in Connecticut at Hamden High, and Hamden was known for its theater department and program. But unfortunately, I was not involved when I was in high school. I had no interest. I didn't get into theater and acting until later on in college when I was at Southern Connecticut State University. So kind of missed out on that high school experience. But I was the opposite of you. I always considered myself a writer. That's kind of what I went to college for. I thought that's what I was going to do. I was an English major. I wanted to write. I always was journaling and writing as a kid. And then when I got into college, at Southern and got into the theater department, I shifted more into performing. So it's interesting how those things work.
Yeah, it's also a bit of a I almost said Ouroboros, but that seems negative. Like a self feeding cycle.
Right.
Yeah. The more you're involved in one, the more you're inspired to get involved with the other. Yeah.
And I don't know about you, but I think when you're involved in these creative pursuits, especially at the level that I was involved in, where it's, we had a theater program that we took our theater troupe to New York and we did all of those things. It's like you're part of every bit of the business. You're not only acting, you're not only writing, you're doing a little bit of everything and you're learning all of it as you go.
Especially because a lot of it is on a budget. So you kind of have,
exactly.
You almost have to fill a dozen different roles just to make the thing happen.
Yeah, for sure.
I like to think that a general term for people that do things like writing, acting, directing, producing, just creator, storyteller, those type of general all-encompassing roles is best suited because it is really a jack of all trades.
It is
role. Being a creative person at times.
Yeah, for sure. And I didn't realize it, but when I was living in New York and trying and pursuing acting, I was an entrepreneur and I didn't even know it. Like I didn't realize I was somebody who had my own business. My own business was me. That's probably why I didn't get as far as I'd like.
You were so money, Dave, and you didn't even know it.
Yeah, exactly. Now actually owning my own business, and I say this to Jason all the time, the people that I'm looking to bring into my agency, I'm always looking for artists or theater people, because those are the people that, that through their training, they know how to make things work. They know how to get things done. They have the people skills and they have the creativity to succeed in any endeavor.
And the drive too, because it takes a lot of perseverance and being able to accept rejection, competition.
For sure. That's a big part of it. Yeah. So now today, so you've got the R Bar going on. Tell me a little bit about the play that you wrote and what happened with that.
So the play, actually, it started out as a R Bar scene. I started writing. I usually write comedy, and I was trying to write a scene that was just an argument between a couple. It started to get away from my original intent, but sometimes, I'm sure you've experienced this, when you're writing something, if you've written your characters well, you start to hear them in your own mind, and you start to imagine, like, based on where I've gotten them this far, where would these human beings, if they were real people, where would they take this conversation?
Right,
what would they want to say next, rather than what would I want them to say next?
Of course.
Which can sound like a really weird way of looking at it, but when I sat and thought and then started writing the next part of the conversation, I realized, like, this isn't going to a funny place. This is going to a real place. This couple's leading to a breakup over a very real issue that they're dealing with, that they haven't been dealing with. And that's why everything has been humor up to this point. And eventually I realized, okay, a 3-minute format's not going to cut it for this. I'm trying to do too much.
Right.
And I just started writing it. There was a short play festival at my college, at Hunter College, that wanted 10-minute plays. And I was able to get this into a 10-minute format. And when I submitted it, it was produced there as a 10-minute short play. But when I watched it and saw actors playing the roles, it dawned on me that I really like this, but this is basically the ending of a full-length play. And I want to write everything that led up to this, and end it with this scene, this aspect of it. So I had a friend that also went to Hunter with me, and she worked at the Crane Theater. She actually produced a Buffy the Vampire Slayer improv weekly show, which is exactly what it sounds like.
That's great.
And she loved my one act. She wanted to help me develop it into a full length play. So over time, I wrote it into about an 80-page script. We had a table read with some actors. Emily wanted to direct it, and she did a casting call. And so we produced it out of pocket at the Crane Theater. And a year later, we submitted it to the New York Theater Festival, which was it's a competition that takes place twice a year. And we produced it there. We didn't win, but it was fun to be able to produce it a couple times with a different cast and see what different actors do with the same roles and the same dialogue.
Yeah, that's always fun.
The title is is The Hulk Can't Perform CPR. And I want to be 100% clear, it has nothing to do with the Marvel character, the Hulk.
Okay.
It does not make an appearance. It's a line in the play. And I think the 10-second summary version of why it has that title is the main character, Lily, is recovering from surgery. She had an ovarian cyst and she got a hysterectomy. And so she's on these painkillers, this patch that makes her low energy. It makes her not able to do things physically the way she used to be able to. And at one point, while she's arguing with her boyfriend, they're talking about, this hypothetical scenario where, could you rescue this drowning child from a car that fell in a river? And they get into this thing about, like, well, if I was the Hulk, can I be the Hulk in this situation? I could rip the door off. And then somebody says, well, the Hulk can't perform CPR. And the reason I liked that as the title is I think it's silly, but at the same time, if you think about it, the Hulk is a superhero, but his strength, his overwhelming strength, can also be a downside, because he wouldn't be able to do something life-saving and delicate as CPR. He would, put his whole fist right through your sternum,
right?
If he tried to.
Right.
I always thought that was funny for other
sometimes you have to find that
superheroes as well.
balance.
Yeah, I always thought that was funny for other superheroes as well. Like Hank McCoy, the Beast. He's covered in hair. How is he performing surgery? How does he scrub it?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Well, Jason knows I'm a big comic book guy. So when I write the plays that I've written, they always have comic book references. They're never about comic books, but there's always a reference or two in there.
I think part of me was also hoping I'd get sued by Marvel because there's no bad press.
Yeah, no, that'd be great publicity for you, for sure. Get everybody out. Now, did the title have anything to do with the actual content other than that conversation? Was there more of a direct connection between what the characters were going through at all?
Absolutely. Yeah. So, Lily is the name of the main character. And she's one of the things she's lamenting being in this recovery period post-surgery is she has her own apartment. She used to be able to just do things entirely independent. If she needed furniture moved around, she could just pick it up and move it. She wouldn't need anybody's help. And every time she tries to do something in this current state, she gets frustrated and lashes out. And so, yeah, she sees herself as the Hulk, and it's kind of, the line is kind of somebody pointing out to her that, yeah, it's great to be the Hulk, but you want to be Bruce Banner sometimes. You want to have the gentle, balanced side of that instead.
Right. Now, have you written other things besides the sketch comedy and that play?
In terms of full length, no, not anything that's full length and been produced. I do have a couple of film scripts that are in the writing process. And one that my roommate is an illustrator, and we're working on turning it into a comic book adaptation that he's drawing.
That's awesome. That's great. I've written a couple of comic books in my day as well, and I'm always looking for illustrators for some of the ideas that I have.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a cool medium. I can't draw.
No, I can't either.
Everybody is some kind of artist, and I am not a visual artist.
Yeah, it's tough. It's like anything else. It takes a lot of work. Before I got into acting when I was in college, that's what I would do, is I would write and I would draw. I never considered myself really good at drawing, but I worked at it. I had a drawing table and I did it every day, and I was getting to a point where I could get by with certain things, but I could never get what was in my head onto the page in the way that I wanted to. And so it was frustrating. So actually finding acting was such a great outlet because it fed everything in a different way. And I was able to really kind of perform and get my creativity out onto the stage as opposed to out on the page.
Well said.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's really interesting. So do you have kind of goals that you have for yourself to do more writing? Besides the scripts you have, do you see yourself continuing to pursue that part of the business?
Absolutely. I never want to have to choose one or the other.
Yeah.
And I don't think I ever will be put in a position where I have to give up one to pursue the other. There's a lot of opportunity for both. And kind of like we've been talking about, when you're involved in one, you almost naturally get involved in the other.
Yeah, for sure.
Often when you're writing something at the independent level, when you want to do something like have a table read and get feedback on it, sometimes in a situation like that, you're struggling to even find actors that are available. And if you're going to be there anyway as the writer, and you have confidence in your reading skills or your voice acting skills, it's just like, okay, awesome. That's just one other aspect of this I can plug myself in. And then that's one less body that I have to coordinate on a schedule. And so sometimes it actually makes it easier to be involved in both things.
Yeah, that's well said. Absolutely. Now you have this other job with a technology company, and Jason actually had described you kind of as a technology expert. Is a lot, obviously, that we want to talk to you about in that regard as well, because with the kind of the up and coming AI movement, with all of these things that are happening, on my side of the business, I see it being used incredibly, in incredibly different ways. And also just like the fears that people have about privacy and technology and things like that. Can you speak to any of the things that are going on in the tech world?
Not as an expert, but as somebody that teaches software to a demographic that is is very typically not comfortable with it on an elementary level. And elementary is definitely the wrong way. I don't teach elementary school. What I mean by that is typically elderly people, a generation that didn't grow up alongside technology.
Sure.
So that's where I have a lot of experience, is helping people who don't know how to navigate modern technology, but they have a desire, like a real world desire to, let's say, I just want to learn how to attach all these photos to an email. Somebody my age or younger would be like, that's the most basic thing ever. But if you interact with somebody that's in their 70s or 80s, and they've never been able to do that, and to them it seems like such an insurmountable obstacle. And if you're able to talk to them and realize, you've accomplished a lot in your life, you've gone through a lot of different changes and phases of technology and things happening, and you've had to adapt and learn things. If you can break it down into terms that they can understand and guide them through it step by step, the way that it can change their quality of life, and how taking away that intimidation factor, it's delightful to see, and I get a lot out of doing that.
Yeah, that's really amazing. That's such a tough thing, especially for older people who are being asked to use technology. Everything is online, is virtual, is the way that people connect, especially when COVID was happening. It's so important for them to utilize the technology. So that's really incredible that that's kind of part of what you're doing.
A big thing is helping to change passwords.
I could use help with that.
Yeah, it's a challenge for everybody, myself included. But one thing that I feel like I make it my personal mission to try to change minds about, rather than being frustrated, like, oh, every website wants me to have a password. Why can't I just have this one that, take out my notebook where I've written it down in pen, and it could just be this one or this variation of my grandchild's birthday. And convincing that person who literally carries down their written password on paper to say, we have all of these protocols, we have all these things that generate a complex password for you. Not only does that take the guesswork out of it or make it more convenient and easy, it's also safer.
Right.
It's protecting your data a lot more, and just getting them to see the light on that is a big part of what I do.
Gotcha. Yeah, that's great. So using those complex passwords instead of the, my son's name followed by my dog's name and my date of birth kind of thing.
Yeah, I remember a few years ago there was a big data leak. I think Jennifer Lawrence and a few other celebrities, a lot of their private photos and social media stuff was released online, and this might be apocryphal, but the news that I read about it was that it wasn't somebody quote unquote hacking. It was they went to they figured out their username and went to a password reset and was able to guess from personal details of their lives, and those what was your hometown, what was your childhood nickname, and was able to figure out how to get through the password reset just because it was a simple that type of password rather than an auto-generated 16 random character kind of thing.
Well, no wonder there's so much fear involving technology and passwords. For example, you hear a story like that and it makes you second guess even using something. The apprehension is real.
Yeah.
I remember we're learning, I've learned in school about what they call the digital divide. The access to the internet and computers. They said it was something that was going to separate people, especially socioeconomically. Mm-hmm. But what I experience even more so, it's a divide of technology knowledge. those people that have grown with it, that have learned it like a language, have easier access and can manipulate it easier, versus those that haven't come accustomed to it, haven't had the education or haven't had the experience with it. So it's less as socioeconomic or access even to technology as it is taking the time to have people educated or just grown within it, just learning through it. Could you talk about that, Louis? Like, do you find people having difficulty with technology of all races, all backgrounds? Like, what is it clearly just age, or is it just something that we all should probably just stop and think about learning a little more?
It's not just age, but I do think our brains develop very similarly to like in terms of learning technology or having a capacity to learn technology in a similar way to learning language. Where at a younger age, your brain's a little more spongy and able to absorb that kind of information, and it's easier to learn. And it doesn't become impossible at any age to learn a second language or to learn technology, but it definitely becomes harder. And for some people, I think it becomes so frustrating that they feel like, well, I've gotten this far, and I have young people in my life that can just do this aspect of it for me, that they start to take that for granted and feel like, well, there's no point. There's no point in putting myself through the paces of this frustrating process of learning how to create a password, how to open an attachment or convert it to a PDF. And I don't know, I think once, like with a language, you start with small things. You learn greetings. You learn how to order something at a restaurant. You learn just the very basics of having an entry-level conversation. And once you have that, it just makes you feel a little more comfortable trying the next step, trying the next level of it. And I just think, unfortunately, some people do get very defeatist about it and feel like, well, I've run the numbers. I have this much life left, and why spend it trying to learn this thing when I could just, avoid it.
Mm. Yeah, I think it's also just overwhelming for people. If you get a smartphone, no matter what age you are, you're suddenly inundated by all of this technology. You have access to anything. And there are people that are also trying to solicit you in every way, shape, and form, via text, via email, via phone call. That's led to a real problem with scams that are out there, especially with our senior population and Medicare beneficiaries. They're being preyed upon constantly. And so being able to protect themselves, I think that's part of the reason why people are not embracing technology at that age, is because there is such a danger associated with it as well. And so, we're trying really hard to to find resources and ways for people to protect themselves and their loved ones so that they can benefit from technology, because there are so many benefits to it. It really, when used well, it can help us to connect more with people, to stay in touch, to have, a higher quality of life. But there just are those dangers associated with it that I think are a barrier for a lot of people.
Yeah, the internet has always been a double-edged sword. I think it's both the greatest invention of mankind, just because it's allowed us to take the amalgamation of everything humans have ever learned and share it with each other for free. Yeah, but at the same time, the other side of that is it's one of the most dangerous things that we've ever invented, because of the way that it's reshaped our minds, our pace, our anxiety. And I think anxiety really is the right word, because it's such an overwhelming, intimidating thing that if you have a bad experience with it even once, you become so anxious about ever approaching it. And it becomes this monster in the dark.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think with our kids and our younger generations too, is that they're growing up with it from such an early age. So, the effect it's having on them, we're seeing anxiety levels rise in those younger age groups. And there's a reason for that. It's, when you have access to everything, there are no kind of borders for you. It makes it very hard to figure things out.
This is maybe a little off topic, but I'm fascinated with this concept I read about recently called Dunbar's number. Are you familiar with Dunbar's number?
I'm not, no.
There's some debate over it, of course. It's a theory in popular sociology that the human brain is wired to have up to about 150 relationships total. And we're meant to fulfill a specific role, if we accept that we came from Neanderthals, like if you were in a tribe on the plains, you would be the best at catching fish, or you would be the best at weaving baskets or finding non-poisonous berries. And you would get a lot of fulfillment out of doing that for your tribe. Your tribe would appreciate you and make you feel like a important person to them. And you would rarely interact with another human on the opposite side of the world who's the best at catching fish, the best at their baskets put your baskets to shame.
Right.
But because of the internet, we're exposed to whatever it is that you do. You can go online and find the person who is the best at that and watch tons and tons of video content they've created. And it can make you feel inadequate, and you shouldn't. And you should just feel like, oh, if I'm doing my best at this thing, that should make me feel fulfilled. And within my society, my tribe, I should still get that sense of fulfillment out of it. But the internet makes that weird. It makes that more of a challenge in some ways.
Yeah, I can see that. That's interesting. Yeah, I mean, there's so many different challenges to technology. And I think it's so important for people to understand it and to learn how to use it in order to really grasp those benefits as well.
I heard 2 days ago that will.i.am has an AI-generated podcast host in his new podcast. So I will be replaced in the next few years.
Whoa.
Yeah, well, we all will be.
That's crazy.
Yeah, it's of course it's generative text. It's not, creating new information.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a complete AI host that he has now.
Yeah, there was actually another story on the radio this morning too. I was in the car with my son. We were just coming back from the baseball field, and they were talking about a fully generated movie, AI generated movie. Mm-hmm. So they said that all of the vocals were actual actors, but that the visuals were all AI generated.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just wild.
AI generated music is a hot thing right now. A lot of people are enjoying it. Actually, they're putting in predictive just formats of what the type of song is, what the content's going to be, and using programs like ChatGPT to gather the information.
Yeah.
I was listening to the interview that will.i.am had. He said, we've been using this for 10 years.
Wow.
There's a lot of these features and a lot of these things that have been happening, to create music. We've been using these, and now we're actually be able to showcase this out and pull back the curtain of how a lot of the entertainment industry has been doing a lot of the things.
Yeah.
But yeah, we're just scratching the surface, and it's not something I think that we should fear. It's something like any other technology. It's a tool that we should look at as to help alleviate some of the burdens that we have.
Agreed.
And finding that balance of that tool and making sure it's nice and sharp like a knife, but that knife can also hurt us. We have to watch out with it is what we have to look at like.
Yeah, well said. For sure. So, Lou, this conversation has been in so many different areas already. I'm not sure exactly where to take it. But it's been so interesting getting to know you and about all the things that you're doing. I would love to learn more about your podcast too. First of all, I love the title. And if I had to weigh in on which side I would be on, I actually think I'd be on the dinosaur side. I'm sure I'm probably against many people, but I would be. But tell me a little bit about how that came up and what your plans are for it.
So on a surface level, it's Robots Versus Dinosaurs is my podcast, and it came from, those are my two favorite subgenres of science fiction.
Great.
Anything to do with dinosaurs, anything to do with robots. Some of my favorite movies are Jurassic Park and also Terminator 2. So the podcast came as a thing where, I just wanted to have an excuse to watch movies and talk about them with my friends and people that are also interested in them. And what I like that it's kind of turned into is it always becomes a discussion on what do these concepts, why do we make films about these things? Why are they two of the most popular subgenres of sci-fi? And the conclusion that I've kind of come to is that one makes us think about the past, so a world without humans because it's before we existed. And the other one makes us think about the future, which is a world without humans because, we made the robots too smart and they eradicated us and now we're all extinct.
Right. That's awesome. And so you bring on guests to the show and you discuss kind of movies and television shows, pop culture, that kind of thing.
Exactly. The show has been running for almost 3.5, 4 years now.
That's awesome.
And the format that I've kind of come to is I always let the guest decide what movie they want to talk about. So they tell me in advance. I watch it. Sometimes we have the opportunity to watch it together. Take notes. I come up with some of the big burning questions that I have about it. And then we just kind of talk about whatever comes up. I usually try to press the guest on, what made you interested in this movie? What do you think this movie says about where we are in our current place in history? With the, how it gives us perspective on either the past or the future or both. One reason why I think letting the guest pick the movie of the week is because it usually that's a safe bet that they're going to be very passionate about it to begin with. So,
yeah, they'll be ready to talk about it.
Yeah, so I'll be able to really drill deep into what is it about this movie that speaks to you. And sometimes they'll pick movies that I've seen hundreds of times and I have a lot of things to say about it. Sometimes it's a movie where I'm watching it for the first time and therefore I'll have a lot of questions about it.
Yeah.
And I think either way, either of those really drives discussion about them.
That's great. Sounds like a lot of fun. I added it to my list this morning, so I'll be sure to start listening.
Thank you. You can find Jason on several episodes. He's a very frequent co-host and very, very good selector of movies, both that are from our childhood and also movies that Jason has challenged me with where I've never heard of them. And we have a really good time watching them and talking about this zany ice pirates or whatever.
Yeah, I'd like to think you have to take the good with the bad.
Yeah.
And so I've brought a few episodes of Robots versus Dinosaurs where it's definitely the head scratchers, like how did this get produced and how are we watching it and is that definitely a dinosaur or not? Or that crude animatronic thing, can we call that a dinosaur? But yeah, there's the podcast always ends up just talking about technology and ethics and not just the fun things that we've learned and grown up about and experienced in pop culture. There's definitely a good center to it, and if everyone gets the opportunity to download it and listen to, please do.
Yeah, I'll be honest. Sometimes we are reaching with the definition.
Yeah.
But I think that's fun too. Like, for example, a friend wanted to do Jaws, and their justification was, well, sharks predate trees. They are even more prehistoric than dinosaurs. But we've also done, we did an episode about Her, and there's no quote unquote robot. There's no T-1000 or anything physical robot in that movie. However, I think it's totally justified to think of a smart AI assistant like in her as a form of robot. And in fact, the fact that, spoilers for her, the fact that this is a consciousness with no body is a main driving part of the plot. And I think that's interesting to talk about.
I agree with you. And it's funny that I think that was the first person to say spoilers on this podcast. Which is really exciting. This is the first time we're on Zoom with this podcast. I can understand kind of, with this podcast, we really kept it as a broad category because I wanted the opportunity to speak to people like yourself who just have a really great story to share and that are touching on so many different things in society and in community. I think the work that you're doing, obviously, as an actor and an artist is incredibly important. I think, that helps to kind of show people, how important creativity is, how important it is to really to dive into the human experience and to get things out of it. And also just, your work to get there. I think it's awesome that you've had this whole journey being a personal trainer, working for a technology company. There's so many times in our lives, I think, when we're growing up that we're being forced to kind of decide on what our path is and what we want to be. And the lesson that I always had, thankfully I had parents who supported it, was you don't have to decide. You can do all of these different things and you can have a balanced life and you can find ways to be healthier and to do all the things that hopefully you're passionate about and that you're dreaming about. And I think it sounds like that's what you're doing. So this has been really just a great conversation, and I appreciate you taking the time to be here. What's coming up for you? So I know you've got the monthly sketch show. Any other things that are coming up that you'd like to promote at all?
Yes, big one. It won't be released this summer. We're filming this summer a sequel to a movie that I was in a year and a half ago called Skye Hoshi, produced by an indie mom and pop movie shop. That's how they describe themselves, called Puremagicpictures. And just to illustrate your point, this is a indie film studio that I got involved with by looking for a writing job. They hired me as a writer for a morning show that they produce, and I would write questions and topics for the host to talk about. And just because I kind of endeared myself with them, working for them as a writer, they were filming their next feature film, and they wrote me a part in it. So I got to act in it. So that movie is out now, Skye Hoshi. You can find it on their website if you search for Puremagicpictures. It's really fun. If you're familiar with the isekai genre, it's where somebody gets transported from the real world into a magical world, usually like into an anime world.
Right.
This is a reverse isekai. An anime character gets pulled magically into the real world, and I play one of the side characters that is trying to help her get back to her anime world before disaster strikes. So that movie's out. You can watch it on Puremagicpictures, and please do. It's really fun. You'll enjoy it. But this summer, we're filming the sequel. It was very successful. We've taken it to a lot of anime conventions and comic conventions, and it's gotten a really good response. And we've gotten enough of a following to film the sequel this summer. So that's the biggest thing that's coming up for me that I want to.
That's amazing.
Promote.
That's awesome. Yeah, I will definitely check that out, and I hope others will too. Fantastic. So thank you again for joining us this morning and working through all of the technology challenges. It's been just such a pleasure talking with you, and we will definitely point our audience in your direction for all of your future endeavors.
Thank you. And I can't wait to listen to this episode, and it was really great talking with y'all.
All right. Thank you so much. Sounds of Health is brought to you by Nutmeg Insurance Advisors and recorded at the offices of Nutmeg Advisory Group. The podcast is produced by Jason Carubia and Dave McNiven with music by Rob Hames. You can find us on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, X, and wherever you listen to your podcasts. Your support means a lot to us, and we appreciate it when you like, subscribe, and leave a review. If you know someone who you think should be a guest on the show, please email us at soundsofhealthpodcast@gmail.com. Each week, we spotlight the stories, people, and resources that inspire and motivate others to improve their health, and we are just getting started. Help us to share these sounds, and don't keep us a secret.